VOTE vote, VOTE vote. Get up off your easy chair, VOTE vote. This is a song that I recall from my earliest days in elementary school. My school was a voting precinct, so whenever election day came around, we were encouraged to wear red, white, and blue, to put I voted stickers on our shirts, and to encourage our parents to come out and vote. Given that we were all around 10 years old, we obviously couldn't vote, but we were highly encouraged to convince our parents and other eligible voters to come out to the polls. This day was always fun for the class, but looking back, I'm kind of realizing that it's a bit sad that they had to get elementary school kids to encourage voting. The reason they promoted this is due to an unfortunate phenomenon in America known as voter apathy, which is when there's a low turnout at voting polls due to disinterest. As you can see in this graph, voter turnout has dramatically decreased over the past 5 decades. So in my speech today, I'm here to persuade you all to vote by telling you the history of voting rights, reasons for voter apathy, and why it does matter. In modern America, voting is a constitutional right granted to every American citizen. However, in our nation's early history, this was not the case. Originally, only white landowning males could vote. But after the Civil War, African American males were technically given the right to vote. But this was infringed upon by something known as disenfranchisement. According to Tara Darling, author of Who Should Be Afforded More Protection in Voting, the People of the States, published on October 1st, 2015 by the Torah Law Review, disenfranchisement is defined as preventing a person or group from having the right to vote. Unfortunately, this was common in post-Civil War America, and African American men were prevented from voting. From the article mentioned previously, methods to enforce disenfranchisement included grandfather clauses, the white primary, and poll taxes. Then, in 1919, the 19th Amendment was passed, and women were now allowed to vote. So, over the past 2 centuries, amazing rights have been granted to oppressed groups of Americans, and you should honor the sacrifices, battles, and struggles of these groups by taking advantage of your right to vote as an American. Voter apathy, while unfortunate, is commonly justified by many citizens. Especially among youth, voting is often seen as unimportant and useless. According to an article entitled Back to the Ballot Box, written by Ella Rhodes and psychologists, published by the British Psychological Society in May of 2015, Russell Brand, who placed 4th on Prospect's list of the world's most prominent thinkers, has officially declared politics dead. Ultimately, his thinking reflects that of many voters around the world. Jessica Gorlin, education coordinator of the Museum of Australian Democracy and author of Suffrage, The Fight for Rights to a Modern-Day Apathy, published in 2013, claims that through active disengagement, young people are letting us know that they're highly disappointed in the behavior of their politicians. Recent years have shown political mishaps like embezzlement, sex scandals, etc., and this has negatively resonated with young voters. Also, the state of the economy affects opinions of voters. This act is known as economic voting. Economic voting refers to how the economy affects incumbent support. According to the article Context Counts, the election cycle development and the nature of economic voting, published by the Journal of Politics and written by Matthew M. Singer from the University of Connecticut and Ryan E. Carlin from Georgia State University in July of 2013. Often, economic policies are created to benefit the nation's wealthiest, leaving the other 99% of citizens to doubt the credibility and helpfulness of their politicians. This discourages voting because the voter feels helpless in their economic state and that voting for these wealthy politicians will do nothing to help that. To appeal to these apathetic groups, politicians employ methods of political consumerism. Political consumerism is defined as the act of influencing producers or choosing products on the basis of their ethical or socio-environmental credentials to bring about change in power relations or in the distribution of public goods. In an article entitled Voting at the Marketplace by Fabian Echegre, published by the Latin American Research Review in 2015. Regardless of these efforts, voters are relatively unconvinced. However, voting grants one the right to have a voice in politics, to choose candidates who benefit their circumstances, and to speak up against injustice. So you should take these reasons for apathy into consideration and consider how they justify you not voting. There are many reasons for people to not vote besides distaste. For some, regardless of constitutional rights, they're simply unable to vote. According to Susie Markman, author of Voting in America and Election Administration, Best Practices and Recommendations, published in 2014, voters with disabilities, those with limited English proficiency, and military and overseas voters are at a disadvantage. Just as certain problems in election administration are more pronounced in some jurisdictions, they also burden some populations. more than others. Inaccessible polling places are a problem for general populations, for example, but they can have a major barrier to participation for those with mobility problems. Similarly, poorly designed and complex ballots pose problems for all voters, but they can prove particularly daunting for voters with limited English proficiency. These circumstances affect multitudes of citizens and ultimately keep them from voting. If these issues affect you, I encourage you to write a letter to your local legislator, research ways to vote that accommodate your situation, like absentee ballots, or to find a voting method or precinct that allow you to effectively vote. Although the current voting system doesn't entirely take these circumstances into consideration, it's your responsibility as a voter to look into possible options so that your right to vote is properly exercised. In conclusion, I encourage you all to VOTE vote. In the audience, I'm aware that most of you are already 18 years old, so given the information in my speech, I'd like for you to, if you haven't already, register to vote and exercise your right in the next local, state, or federal election. You may just be one person, but you're one person with a voice, the ability to vote, and the right to vote. Minorities and women in your position 2 centuries ago would have given anything to vote, so you owe it to them to take advantage of this wonderful freedom and to make your voice heard. Before voting, it's important to research candidates, pay attention to their campaign techniques, and their political promises to see how their election into office would benefit you as a citizen. If you suffer from setbacks such as inability to access a precinct, lack of proficiency in English, or disability, you are not alone, and there are ways for you to vote, including absentee ballots, handy-capable voting precincts, and bilingual voting ballots. Come time for the next election, if you're eligible, you should leave your respective voting precincts wearing an I voted sticker with the satisfaction of knowing you've honored your right as an American. Thank you. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Have you registered to vote?
I have registered to vote. I actually turned 18 today, but I pre-registered and I look forward to voting in the primaries in March. Yes.
What is an absentee ballot?
An absentee ballot is a ballot that someone can submit somewhere other than a voting precinct. It's ideal for the elderly, people in college, or people overseas, and allows them to submit a vote without actually being in their precincts according to their address. Yes?
What's absentee voting again? Or
Voter apathy is when people are not interested in voting because they feel it's useless, that it's a waste of time, that their voice won't be heard, and that their vote doesn't count. And so it's very common because people feel that the electoral college and the voting system is unfair, and so that their vote doesn't matter, but in fact it does. Okay, thank you all very much.
Have like legal repercussions like that, it wasn't about like you're going to jail.
That is a social norm.